put down that camera and strap in. It's time for a new episode of TogChat Live. It's an open mic night for photographers. Get ready for 60 minutes of your photography questions in real time with answers from your host, Joe Edelman.
Hey gang, how's everybody doing? It is Wednesday night. It is time for another Talk Chat. Thank you all for joining me. My name is Joe Edelman. I'm going to be your host for the next 60 minutes or so. And we're going to talk about all things photography. Got a lot of people here tonight. Jency's here, Deck Luck, May, Michael T. Carl's here, Joe Ash, Stefan, John Edward, Ian, Sven's here, Andrew just snuck in there, Dave Bullen, Ronaldo. Thanks, gang. I really appreciate you taking the time out of your week to spend some time here and talk about photography. So I better forewarn you, I have very few questions lined up, which means this could be a really short show if you guys have nothing that you want me to talk about. So go ahead and chime in there, throw some questions into the chat, and I will do my best to give you guys the answers that you are looking for. So as always, we'll get the business out of the way while everybody's checking in. Please remember, take a few seconds. It doesn't hurt. It's really easy. And go ahead and make sure that you do the social media thing. Give it that thumbs up. Go ahead and hit the comment button. Leave a comment. Follow me on social media. All that good stuff. You know the drill by now, okay? So also our contest. Don't forget we have the TogStuff giveaway every week. Last week, what did we have last week? Last week we had a 1-year Format.com Pro membership for a website. That went to, you ready? It went to Peter Kent from Simi Valley, California. So Peter is our winner for last week's Format.com 1-year Pro membership. And this week, what do we have coming up? For our prize this week, we are giving away another LumaPro Ultra Soft and Softbox 3 with Ultra Straps. It's like $80 worth of prize there, gang. So I'm going to put the link here in the chat window. Make sure you take a couple seconds and enter this week's contest so that you guys can win the prize. Okay? We'll be giving that away next Wednesday on TogChat. And let's go ahead. We still got a bunch of people coming in. Kevin's here, Dex here, Al B, Curtis, Jacob, Ian B, Javier's here, Steven's here, Gord's here. So listen, while everybody's still sneaking in, let's go ahead. We'll do all the business, right? Let's take care of the PhotoFlex, the Share Your Lighting contest sponsored by PhotoFlex. So as you guys know, each week PhotoFlex sponsors our photography contest where we look at behind the scenes pictures and a finished shot, and they give us a really cool prize. So this week's prize is a Smith Victor Spectrum light. It's got an approximate retail value of $119.95, and the prize for this week's Share Your Lighting contest, sponsored by PhotoFlex, goes to Rich Ryan from Cape May, New Jersey. This is a really cool shot, and it's even got a really cool story behind it. So here, I'm going to read you Rich's information that he submitted with the photo. He wanted to do a low-key or a dark kind of contrasty portrait of his father, who is a retired U.S. Air Force. So he had this image in mind, and he found this biplane at a local county airport that he got permission to shoot in front of. He originally was going to use one softbox on camera left and a silver reflector on camera right to try and get some bounce back to the jacket and separate his father from the plane. He also wanted to get just enough light on the yellow plane. The reflector worked well, but since he had a second speed light, he decided to see what it would do on low power. So he ended up with this result. And I'm going to switch over here so that we can see his setup. Here we've got one speed light up in the softbox on camera left. We've got the second speed light down here on camera right. He shot this with a Nikon D610, a Nikon 24-70 lens, ISO 400. Lens was set at about 70 millimeter and where are we at here? F 9.5, 1/125th of a second. His speedlights were some inexpensive Yangwinos. So it just goes to show you, gang, don't have to have the latest gear, the newest, the biggest, the best to be able to turn out some really awesome images. So Rich, congrats. I think your image, let me get rid of that format thing there. Sorry about that, guys. I think that image is like seriously awesome. Really, really great job. And the fact that it's your father, I mean, that's just, that's really cool. So listen, for next week, gang, the prize that PhotoFlex is giving us, I'm going to paste this into the chat window here so that you guys have the opportunity to go ahead and win. The link is there, everything you need. They're giving us a PhotoFlex 10 by 20 PhotoFlex gray background. So it's a muslin background, very versatile. Obviously, you guys have seen my video about gray backgrounds. You can put colored gels on them, turn them into just about any color that you want to. So I encourage you, remember the cool part about this contest, gang, PhotoFlex gives away a prize. All you have to do is submit your finished image and a behind the scenes image. You don't have to use PhotoFlex gear to win the prize. That's awesome. All right, so let's jump in. I have got a whole bunch of questions here now, finally, and keep them coming, gang. We need those questions. Like I said, otherwise it's going to be a long night of just like listening to me yap, right? So just so you have it, there's the link for the TogStuff giveaway so that you can enter that. I'll leave that on the screen, and that way you've got that information. So one of the first questions I had here tonight, there's a bunch in the chat. So again, keep them coming. We got a whole hour. You know me, I hardly ever finish in an hour. I kind of suck at the 1 hour thing. So, we'll go from there. But first question I had was from Mark, looks like Hussein. Do you use a makeup artist for every shoot? Are there tips for keeping something on hand for times when one isn't available? So actually, Mark, that's a really great question. If you follow me for a little bit, you know that I'm pretty hardcore about the makeup artist thing. So if I said 100% of the time, of course I'd be lying to you, because there are indeed times where, for various reasons, I'm going to cut corners, or simply, honestly, it may be a client that's just not willing to spend the money, and I am feeling reasonably confident that whatever it is we have to do in the picture is not going to wind up looking like crap without the makeup artist. But I assure you, overwhelming majority of the time, probably 98 to 99% range, I am working with a makeup artist. So there's a couple things that I can tell you, though, and it's a great question. Are there things that you keep on hand for the times when you don't, etc.? So yes, a couple of things. First, though, let me just go ahead and point you, in case you have not seen them. Hopefully you've seen them, but just in case you haven't, on my YouTube channel, if you type in the word, click that little magnifying glass up in the upper right-hand corner when you get to the page, type in makeup artist, and there's a couple videos that are going to come up, but two in particular that I would encourage you to watch. And it's these very first two that you're going to see here. One, what to know about working with a makeup artist, and the other one, you need a makeup artist for great portraits, headshots, and modeling shots. The reason you want to watch those are, number one, because they're going to give you a lot of tips for actually working with makeup artists, and also hopefully convince you a little bit more about the overwhelming importance of working with a good makeup artist. Secondly, you will pick up a couple tips in these videos about things that you might want to have on hand. I'm going to paste the links here into the chat window for those of you that are watching and maybe want to kind of check them out afterwards here. There you go. So there's the links to both of those. Now, the things that I keep on hand kind of that I find very, very helpful when somebody comes in and they're doing their own makeup, it's a real simple shot, whatever. Hairspray. So if you follow me along, you know that I always talk about it. I use Aquanet. Any young girl today, especially, you say Aquanet and their eyes roll like, oh my God, like he's so old. That stuff's like ancient and it sucks. Basically, it is. It's junk hairspray, and that's exactly what's great about it, okay? You could take like half a can of that stuff, spray it in somebody's head, spend 10 or 15 minutes doing the pictures, and then it brushes right out. It doesn't hold really well. The problem with salon-quality hairspray is that if you get a lot of it in the person's hair, the hair starts to take on a different texture, which means it's going to impact the way your lights reflect off the hair, and if you're doing a couple shots and you're going to keep spraying it, by the time you're done, the person looks like they got helmet head. The hair doesn't look natural at all. So hairspray is a really big one. I always have spare like hair bands, bobby pins, safety pins, that kind of stuff, which, it's not actually makeup, but, I do have 3 different shades of matting foundation that come in handy sometimes. Like for me, and I hate this, but I have this age spot right in the middle of my nose. So like if I was going to go and I was going to do a shot of myself even, I would take a little bit of that on a little foam makeup wedge, and I would dab that and blend it in with my skin to cover that age spot. Certainly I could take it out and retouching in post, but even where that's at, a little turn of the face, that thing can basically visually run into the eyeglasses, and then it's a nightmare to have to retouch. So those are times where it's handy to have just some of that matting foundation on hand, keep it available. So along with that, you need some little makeup wedges, those little foam wedges that you buy. It's also good to have some makeup remover, which are basically they're kind of like wet wipes. They're in a little packet. They're wet wipes for a person to be able to take makeup off. I have had makeup artists show up with and not bring makeup remover for the model. So the only other option then, if I don't have makeup removers, is since my studio is in my home, I'm going to let that model go and use, one of my bathrooms, and then also some of my towels, which then I have to wash and all that stuff. So makeup wipes, very, very handy. In addition to the hairsprays, the makeup wipes, the foundation, other makeup type things that are a good idea to have. Let's see, off the top of my head, that's about it, because the problem with beyond that, you're getting into the realm of stuff that is kind of very, very specific. Like I wouldn't worry about keeping like mascaras and that type of stuff. Oh, I do have false eyelashes. I have lots and lots and lots of different types of false eyelashes. So that's also something that can come in handy, because sometimes I may have something that's more suited for a look that I'm after than what the makeup artist brought with her, etc. So, that's also kind of, very helpful. Okay. So, that's my recommendation. I hope that helps. Okay. Harry Smith, how do I feel about Tamron lenses? They're a lens, man. I don't really have any feelings towards them. If there's like a specific one that you're looking for, that's kind of one of those questions, Harry. And I know I say this every week, and I will probably say this for the rest of my YouTube career. That is kind of the worst way that you can ask a question, because simply what you're looking for is just a random opinion, and random opinions are worthless. So Harry, now that I've kind of been tough on you, give me a little bit more feedback. Okay, how do I feel about Tamron lenses? So I would assume that means you're looking for a lens. What kind of lens are you looking for? What kind of camera are you going to put it on? Is it full frame? Is it APS-C? What types of images do you want to take with that lens? Give me a little bit more context. I will do my darndest to help you, make a buying decision, or at least point you in a direction to do some research. Okay. So Anand, how you doing, man? How is that Panasonic G7 working out for you? I hope you are having fun with it. Here is my replacement for that Panasonic G7. Just arrived. Yeah, the Olympus Pen F. Sweet little camera. Having a ton of fun with it already. So let's see here. Nerd45, do I still do paid work as a photographer, or are you more about workshops and events? All the above, man. 2 years ago, in fact, it'll be 2 years next month, I made the insane decision, with the support of my wife, who's amazing, to stop taking clients for paid work. Now, that being said, I did keep 3 bigger commercial clients that I've had for decades, that I do usually 2 to 3 projects for a year, but they pay really, really, really well. So my income at this point comes from teaching, YouTube, educating, workshops, traveling, all that kind of stuff. That's basically what I do. The best part of it is I get to shoot more now than I was shooting when I was running a full-time business as a photographer. And when I shoot now, I shoot what I want to shoot, because I'm creating shoots that I can use to illustrate the videos that I'm doing. So in other words, I'm having a ton of fun. Honestly, that's what it comes down to. So, Will B, have I ever been to San Francisco looking for off the beaten track photo ops and ideas? I've been to San Francisco, but I'll be honest with you, all the shooting I've done in San Francisco has actually been in and around hotels, which is not exactly very sexy. A lot of stuff down at Fisherman's Wharf, that kind of stuff. But I'll tell you what, Will B, I have a feeling, and I haven't caught all the names yet, but I have some new friends in the Micro Four Thirds world, and I know that some of those new friends were recently out in San Francisco for a fan event with Olympus, and Olympus took them all around San Francisco with some of the Olympus visionaries and showed them some really, really cool spots. So let's see if they'll maybe weigh in here and give us some tips, and if not, message me before I get off the air again here towards the end, and I can put you in touch with a couple shooters that I know would gladly share some suggestions with you, and give you some really good suggestions, especially if this is your first time going. Okay. So let's see. Leon Mendieta, what are your thoughts about a graphics tablet? My thoughts are, if you do a lot of retouching, use one. I highly recommend it. I use the Wacom's. This is the Intuos Pro. It's a medium size, so it's a slightly bigger one, and that's in part because I've got, two 31-inch screens that are sitting here, so I got a lot of real estate that I work on. If you're working on one monitor, you can probably get away with even a small, depending on your preferences. But I highly recommend them. I was very reluctant to use them at first. In fact, true story. Everybody thinks that because you're on YouTube and you do all this cool stuff that life is perfect and you never make mistakes and all that stuff. So I'll share an honest story with you guys. Over the course of probably 10 years, I bought 4 Wacom tablets. These are earlier models. Had them all for about 2 months apiece and wound up selling them. See, part of the reason why I always joke, part of the reason why I became a photographer is because I can't draw to save my life. Like, I suck at drawing, just miserably. So the problem is, it was very awkward for me. I understood the sensibilities of having a tablet, but because I was so uncomfortable drawing, even just like making a circle, I really struggled with them. And, the reality of it is, let's face it, anytime you go to kind of a new type of technology like that, there's a learning curve built in. I mean, when I switched from Nikon to Olympus, there's a learning curve built in getting used to the cameras. Even this new little Pen F that I picked up, there's a learning curve getting used to it. So I had a really hard time committing. So finally, we're going on 6 years now, when I made the switch from Windows to Mac. That's when I committed and said, that's it. Time to pull up the big boy pants and buckle down and really get accustomed to using a tablet. And I've used one ever since. I do, just because of my work setup here and with doing the videos, I do connect it and disconnect it. If I'm retouching, it's in front of me. If I'm not retouching, I disconnect it and use a keyboard, which is just, the regular Apple keyboard. I highly recommend it. With a little bit of practice, it gives you much more control. You're able to finesse your retouching work much, much better. And the other key is, assuming that you're going to go with Wacom, because as far as I'm concerned, they are the best, make sure that you are using all the customizable features that are available, because that's part of what makes the tablet really, really work, is the efficiency that you can build in with all of the customizable, hot buttons and zoom dials and that are on it. So take your time. If you go onto YouTube, you'll find a bunch of videos where people have shown you kind of their customizations and how it works for them. So I would encourage you, watch a bunch of them, see what you think is going to work for you, and then go from there. But I highly recommend it. Okay. So Charles Stewart, what's going to be the best budget vlogging camera? Gosh, Stewart, or Charles, sorry. I mean, I would start out by saying, the one that you have, probably the best budget camera, literally, is an iPhone. I mean, quite seriously. Heck, they're making major motion pictures with iPhones now, right? I'm not, by no means am I an expert on what's out there. I mean, obviously the Canon 80D is still a very popular vlogging camera. Some of the smaller Sonys, very, very popular. I would have to suggest to you, do a lot of research. And Charles, honestly, the first thing I would say to you is, if you are looking at vlogging for the potential of making money, the first thing you need to do is some serious soul searching. And what I mean by that is, you have got to make sure that you understand what you're getting into, what the time commitment is going to be, and realize that you are not going to find fame and fortune immediately. It is a lot of work. It is a crazy amount of work. So, make sure that you've got a very clear focus and idea of what it is you want to accomplish as a vlogger and what your message to the world is. What's your mission? So I would advise you, before you make your very first video, you need to essentially figure out what is your mission statement, your 30-second elevator pitch, so to speak, as to why I should be interested, or anybody else should be interested in your channel. Then dive in, and it's a grind. You've got to produce videos and produce videos and produce videos, and understand that you're not going to have a lot of people watching them at first, but you got to keep at it and keep at it. So if you haven't started, I would tell you straight out of the box, don't go buy a camera. Work with whatever you have. If all you have is a phone, work with your phone. Get the routine going, get the habit going, and then from there start adding gear. That would be my advice. So, Richard Oliver, what are my thoughts on the ProPhoto A1 as an on-camera flash for weddings? Sorry, I'm not going to bite Richard. I know everybody's like, oh, he's going to go off on that one. You know what, Richard? If you got $1,000 to throw away on a speed light, knock yourself out. That's kind of how I look at it. Look, ProPhoto gear is awesome gear, right? It just is. High quality, excellent color light, obnoxiously, stupidly overpriced. Done. I mean, that's my opinion. So if you can afford it, you want to throw away that kind of money, knock yourself out. I'll tell you this, Richard. And so I'm going to be very honest here. So to put this in context, and this is not meant to insult you. This is kind of, using some stereotypes and statistics, okay? My concern is, if you are at a level where you have got to ask me that question, you should not be buying that flash. You are potentially going to throw away money on that flash. My feeling is most photographers who are at a level where they are really going to make use of that flash and really be able to get their money's worth out of that flash, they don't need to come to me for advice. Just being honest with you. So just be honest with yourself. Before you spend $1,000 on a flash, make sure that you really need a $1,000 flash unit, because I assure you, everything that can do for $1,000, I can do it for a whole lot less money. Just can. Okay. So, let's see. Lan, the F-Stopper guys make some of their behind-the-scenes vlogging materials using their phones. Sure, yeah. I mean, phones work great. It's all a matter of the toughest part about vlogging, gang, it's getting started. It's getting started and getting the habits going. Believe me, that is the toughest part of this whole YouTube thing. It's generating content and generating content and generating content. I'm like 270 videos in, and believe me, sometimes it's a grind. It is simply a grind. So you've got to know what your message is. What's your mission? Why are you doing it? Because if you are not passionate about that mission, believe me, it's going to be a miserable experience. It just is. Okay. So Chris Stocker, how much retouching do I do myself and how much do you outsource? So I need to give you two answers, Chris. Prior to purchasing the Olympus cameras, so back when I was an Nikon guy, I outsourced all of my base retouching. So, and that's a Joe term. What I mean by base retouching is skin blemishes, flyaway hairs, actually skin blemishes and flyaway hairs, occasional skin blending in terms of color tones and things like that. I sent all of that out. And then I did essentially all of any liquefy work, body shaping, and then kind of all of the finished look, giving the image kind of my feel. Now, obviously, when I switched from the Nikon D810s to the Olympus EM1 Mark II, I was almost having the number of megapixels that I was working with. So I was going to a smaller file size. I knew that it would be a different process, retouching the images. How did I know that? Well, because I remember back when the Nikon cameras only had 20 megapixels, and then we went up to like 33 or 24 and then 33 and so on. The way you retouch your files changes, okay? So I pretty much knew when I made the switch that I was going to take a couple of months and go back to retouching everything myself, because working with a retoucher, it's a lot like the videos that I have about working with a makeup artist. There's a relationship. You have to be able to communicate. When you work with a retoucher, you don't just like throw your files over the wall via email and say, okay, make them look good. And then they come back and they look good. No, There has to be communication and an understanding and a relationship so that, they can't read your mind. All right. They look at the image. They don't necessarily see what you see. So there's kind of a learning curve between you and your retoucher. So I do use a retoucher who is in India. He is absolutely awesome. If any of you would like his contact information, I will gladly supply it with you. Join my Facebook group. Let me give you the link to my Facebook group here. I'll get you that information. And I share it all the time in the Facebook group. I'll gladly provide you with his information. He is super good on surface, super fast, very reasonably priced. All of that said, I am just about at the turning point now where I am going to go ahead and start giving him my retouching back again. But I knew that I was going to need to take a couple of months to get accustomed to the differences in working with the smaller size files. Now that I'm feeling very confident with that, I'm in a position where I'm going to be able to communicate properly with him with regards to what I need done, how I want it done, and know that I'm, giving him realistic expectations in that sense. So again, it's two-way communication street. So pretty much I would say over the next couple of weeks, actually, I'll be reverting back to where I was, where I will be outsourcing all of, blemish, flyaway hairs, all the skin retouching, some skin tone blending, those types of things. And then I'll basically be doing the finishing work. So, okay. Let's see. Lauren, I recently watched your video about holding a reflector correctly. Turns out I was doing it wrong. Some of my photos have weird uplighting from the reflector. Can never use it now. Yeah, I mean, hey, it's part of the learning curve, Lauren. Hopefully you didn't learn that trick from another YouTuber who's well known for putting that reflector underneath. Hopefully you just did it as an honest mistake. And believe me, it's a mistake that a lot of people make. But now that you know, that won't be a problem. So that's awesome. Okay. There you go, guys. Sorry if the link's not working. Take the trailing slash out at the end or go cut and paste it into a browser. I promise you it is the correct link. The group is there. Okay. So, Marco, I tried at Olympus Mark 1, EM1 Mark 2 in an event, loved it, but couldn't try it at high ISO. What's your thoughts about it? Well, so it's funny, Marco, I had a conversation about that, this very weekend. I was at an event in upstate New York called Focus NY, which was the, Professional Photographer Society of New York State, which is the kind of the regional PPA event for New York. Got to meet some awesome photographers up there. Was on the speaking docket with some incredible photography talent, people like Rick Friedman, Jessica Lark. Awesome event. So this came up in a conversation at lunch actually on Sunday about low light with the Micro Four Thirds. So the first thing I have to tell you, kind of in response to your question, Marco, is the last time I checked, the word photography means that it requires light. Photo, okay? It seems to me today a little bit mind-boggling that everybody wants to be able to take pictures with no light at all. When I started my career at 11 years old, and as my career progressed, you couldn't get film to go past like ISO 400 without everything just like falling apart at the seams. But yet amazingly, we took good pictures. And we did that because we learned how to see light. We learned how to solve problems. So, the first thing I will say to you before I give you my input on how well the camera does is, be honest with yourself about what you really need to do in terms of working with low light. So let's get it straight. If we're talking strictly bench test numbers, all right, physics, a full frame sensor is always going to work better at higher ISOs than a Micro Four Thirds sensor. And when I say always, I mean based on the current technology that's available. Who knows what's around the corner, right? But with the current retoucher that we have, the full frames, of course, are by design going to do better at higher ISOs. That being said, you have to raise a couple questions. Number one, how high an ISO do you need to go? Number two, do understand that with the Olympus, the EM1 Mark II, you've got the 5-axis in-body image stabilization that is the hands down best in the industry. And I'm not saying that because I'm an Olympus owner. I'm not saying that because you guys know that I did a talk for, presentation for Olympus. No, I'm saying that because it is. And it's because of the way it's designed. The Olympus sensor floats. Even the Sony, which is very good at image stabilization, it's on ball bearings on a track. The Olympus sensor is on a magnetized bed and it floats. I've tried it. When I was doing my research, you guys have heard me tell the story about how it took me about 1.5 years of research and renting and trying out the cameras before I switched. I kept seeing people in the Facebook groups posting like landscape images and that, saying that they shot these pictures at a half a second handheld. So being a Nikon guy for all those years, every time I see that, I'm kind of like, yeah, that's BS. There's no way. Half a second handheld? Come on. You know, maybe once in a rare full moon, somebody gets lucky that way, but come on. Like, I've seen picture after picture. So one of the first things I did when I rented the EM1 Mark II for the very first time is I decided to test out that in-body image stabilization. And sure enough, with a little bit of effort, you know, you gotta pay attention, right? But a little bit of effort, half a second, tack sharp, no problem. As long as, of course, you're photographing a stationary object. If there's subject movement, well then, you know, that changes that, right? So keep in mind that when you've got that kind of image stabilization, what you're also doing is you're gaining additional stops, whether you use it as shutter speeds or whether you use it as ISO. So it's kind of an offset in that regard. So that being said, the highest that I have had a need to take my camera so far with ISO has been ISO 1200, which for me is like crazy high ISO. So again, I'm not one of those photographers that's determined to be able to take pictures where there's no light. I'm fine with the concept that photography requires light. So all of that being said, I had no problems with the 1200 ISO at all. None. If you are a pixel peeper, and that's a key piece here, Marco. If you're a pixel peeper, I will tell you straight up, sure, you're going to see a difference and you won't like it. But I'm not a pixel peeper. I never have been a pixel peeper. I'm concerned with how do my finished images look. As I mentioned to you guys, if you saw the pictures that I posted on social media at WPPI in Las Vegas, Olympus had one of my images printed 8 feet wide by 6 feet tall. I had the luxury of being there before the image was put up on the wall, so I was able to stand right in front of this image, like arm's length, and look at the image. You count the eyelashes, there was no noise, it was tack sharp, it was absolutely fine. That's 8 feet wide by 6 feet tall. So, what I would encourage you, Marco, based on your questions, especially if you do tend to pixel peep, rent one. Rent one, test it out at the higher ISOs. Marco, let me know what country you're in, because I may be able to also help you out with some ways that you can get a hold of one to try out, okay? So give me a little response back and let you know. Or let me know, okay? So let's see. Let me scroll back up to get the beginning stuff, and then we'll come back to these newer questions. Oh gosh, and I know I'm gonna butcher your name, so I apologize. I'm gonna go with Tehazwi. I hope I'm close. You've been doing fashion photography for over 3 years. Most of the projects have been TFP. I'm planning to shoot for local brands. Could you please give some inputs on how to approach local brands? Go talk to them if they're local. So that's the key. You're using the phrase local brands. Go talk to them. Don't send emails. Don't do that kind of stuff, because understand part of what they're hiring. Yes, they're hiring your portfolio. So hopefully you have an impressive portfolio to show them that's going to make them feel like, oh my God, we have to have this guy. Because if you don't have that kind of a portfolio, then it's not yet time to go and approach them. But assuming that you've got that portfolio, then the best thing you can do is go walk in the front door of their offices and ask to speak with the director of marketing. And make sure you have business cards with you. It might be a good idea to print like a little 5-inch by 7-inch promotional card that you can leave with if that person's not available. But don't do what so many people do in today's world, which is just honestly stupid business. Don't send off the random email saying to the person, hey, I'd like to talk to you about doing your photography. Like, hit me up. Right? That's just a really, really horrible idea. Best thing you do is go walk in the door. The worst thing anybody can say to your face is no. So go walk in the door. It's the best thing that you can do. Okay. Let's Let's see here. Ian, you mainly shoot outdoor and air shows, stream landscapes, but on listening to your shows, I would like to try my hand at portraits. Does this mean I have to go back to the drawing board? No, man, not at all. I mean, I'm not sure what you're thinking about in terms of going back to the drawing board. Do you mean like different gear or like a whole new knowledge base? I mean, all the basics of photography that you would use for air shows and streams and landscapes, everything with your exposure triangle, everything with depth of field, even potentially you may have dealt a little bit with the inverse square law in those situations. All that applies to people. So the learning curve, which I wouldn't call it back to the drawing board, the learning curve is how to photograph someone attractively, how to make them look good. So there's a little bit of psychology involved. There's that, kind of engaging the person. But yeah, I don't see it as going back to the drawing board. I just see it as a new set of challenges. It would be the same as if I were to go out and start doing like landscape work and that type of stuff. I mentioned last week, somebody was asking me about the Olympus Visionaries. There's a guy out in Michigan. His name's Jamie McDonald. And also another Olympus visionary, Mike Bonig. And I watch these guys post images from the work that they do. And so one of my goals is I've got to go to Michigan and I've got to shoot with these guys. They will school the bejesus out of me when it comes to doing landscapes and all this cool stuff, but I'm inspired by their work. So, it's kind of my bucket list of things to do. And hopefully this summer, I'm going to start doing a little bit of this even locally here. There's a very well-known street photography or photographer that's based here in the Lehigh Valley in Allentown that he spends a lot of time in New York, does a lot of work in New York. I've talked to him about going and spending a day with him and shooting. I want to start very purposely putting myself in kind of these other situations that are not my forte, and then, recording this and sharing with you folks my experiences and kind of the learning curve and the differences. So, Ian, I would say, man, go for it. Have fun with it, okay? All right, so Marco, here he is. So he's from Italy. I've always been a pixel peeper, but recently I'm trying to change the aspect since most of your photos end up on social media where single pixels don't matter. So yeah, so then, so two things, Marco. Number one would be try to rent one. Now, I don't know what the options are there in Italy, but the other thing is Olympus in Europe. Now, I know Olympus in the UK. So the one thing I don't know, but I'll gladly try and find out for you, Marco, if you want to send me an email after TogChat. I know that Olympus in the UK has a program where you can get your hands on a camera and a lens for like a weekend and try it out, like for almost nothing, if not nothing, I believe. Okay. I don't know if they do that elsewhere in Europe or what the policies are, but I can gladly find out for you. I know the right people to ask, so I'll gladly track that down. But I would encourage you, obviously, guys, I love Olympus. At no point has anybody ever heard me say, oh my God, you should switch to Olympus, right? I'm not going to tell you that. Your camera choices are a very personal choice. If I manage to get people to learn anything from my switch, I hope it's just to get people to pay a little bit more attention that bigger isn't always better and bigger isn't always necessary. That's really my mission as far as that goes. So that being said, I would encourage you to do what I did. Rent one, try it out. And if you're not able to do that, let's see if we can find out where in Europe you can borrow one from Olympus. Olympus as a company is very good at being willing to put their cameras in the hands of consumers to try them out. Something that the other cameras, when has Nikon ever handed you a camera and said, go try it out? When has Canon done that? When has Sony done that? They don't do that. Olympus does that, and they're great at doing that. So follow up with me, and I'll definitely help you track down a way that you might be able to do that. Okay? So let's see. Tenonix. I hope that's right. What equipment or accessories would I recommend for portrait photography? You already own a tripod and a camera. Well, it depends on what kind of portrait photography you want to do, Tenonix. Honestly, I mean, the first thing I'm going to tell you, since your question is so broad, go watch my videos. Honestly, that would be the best thing that you could do first. Watch my videos and decide what kind of portrait photography you want to do. You're going to do traditional portraits. You're going to do fashion portraits and beauty portraits like I do. What is your interest? So the key there then is you need to make sure you've got the right lens. A tripod may or may not be necessary. If you're going to shoot on location in natural lighting situations, maybe a reflector. If you're going to work in a studio, you're going to need some lights and potentially backgrounds to work with. So, I would honestly suggest starting out with my videos. because a lot of my videos, most of my videos kind of evolve around portraiture, and they're going to give you a much better idea of kind of what you need to be looking at from a gear standpoint. Okay. Chris Stocker, the Nissan DI-700 Air Flash Gun and Commander. Have you given it a go? And if so, what do you think? I have 3, but I wonder if I should have gone for a cheaper system. It's late here, just back from the pub. So Chris, never tried it. I am like, I know right now. So here, I want to clarify a point because somebody called me out for this last week. And I kind of got like really bummed when they said it, but I totally understand the perception. And perception's everything, right? You guys know that I talk about the geartographer concept, right? The idea of people that are so wrapped up in their gear that they don't pay attention to the quality of their pictures. And, somebody, called me out last week. It's like, you're a geartographer because like you're talking about all this gear lately. For the last 3 months, I probably do sound like a geartographer. I bought all new Olympus gear. I just swapped out one of my Panasonics because, as I've explained, I'm getting rid of all my Panasonic cameras too. I'm going to go 100% Olympus for everything. That being said, I'm not a geartographer, and I defend my position because, obviously, for me, at the end of the day, I am most concerned with the image quality. The cameras are a tool. It just so happens that I just switched. So that being said, unfortunately, Chris, I'm not a big one for trying out stuff that's out there unless I'm like legitimately considering using it. Nissan is nice gear, but not gear that I'm interested in. So I have to be really honest. I'm not at all familiar with that model number. I would say if you've got 3 of them and you're happy with it, unless you have an overwhelming need to maybe add more or use other features, I'd stay right where you're at. I think it's a horrible mistake for anyone to feel that they've got to be using the newest and latest gear out there unless there's something that demands to them they absolutely need to use it. And then, of course, then it's worth looking at. So, Mark Dolce, thank you for the kind words. I really appreciate it. Mike Davis, do I use a light meter or do I rely on the camera and experience? All of the above. I'll be really honest, Mike. I don't use the meter as religiously as I should. You hear me talk about it on YouTube and you see me use it on YouTube because I try to present best practices to people. So I highly recommend it. When I did my presentations at WPPI and Imaging USA, I used a meter, especially if you're just starting out. Highly, highly recommend it. And it's a great habit to get into. Okay. Beyond that, when you've done it for as long as I have, when you get to know your gear really well, you can frequently cut corners. I try to make it a point to use it most of the time. And obviously I'm being totally honest with you guys, but I try to make it a point to use it most of the time because what it also does is it slows me down a little bit and forces me to be a little bit more deliberate with my actions in the studio, which is a great idea. So if you're, just starting out, I would absolutely encourage you to, to use one. Cathal, do I use the 8200s with your honey badgers? And if so, what trigger are you using? I don't. No, I use them independently. The honey badgers are hands down my go-to lights, guys. I have come to terms, for those of you that have been around for a while, you know that I got off on a kind of sour foot with the 8200s. So I've come to terms with the 8200s. I've actually found a lot of value in them. But the honey badgers are definitely my go-to strobe, and that's my studio strobe. What I am changing out, for those of you that have followed me for a while, you know that I was also using the LumaPro speedlights. I don't need, 3 or 4 different lighting systems. So when it comes to a portable strobe that I can take out on location, the Godox 8200s are definitely more versatile and much more powerful than the LumaPro. So in fact, if you're interested in buying my LumaPro LP180s, they're for sale. But I am selling my LumaPro LP180s. I have switched over to the Godox 8200s for location work, but I don't use them intermingled. I use them separately. So for Godox, I have the X Pro transmitter and the old, the RT1 or whatever it is, basically the new one and the old transmitter. The one's 49 hours, the one's 69. I just got the new one, so I haven't even actually had a chance to use it yet. It just arrived, and it is indeed a much nicer interface, faster, easier to understand, and easier to access, so that's good. For the honey badgers, I use the Interfit manual remote that that is available for them. Okay, and there's some cool new things coming out for the honey badgers later this year. So it's going to be like I know that Interfit is trying to release some of it in time for Photokina, which will be in September. But yeah, there's going to be some nice new features heading down the pike. So it's possible I may not even need those Godoxes by the time it's all said and done. We'll see. So. Let's see here. Where are we at here? Where are we at here? Sliding on up to see who I missed. So Eli, if you shoot portraits, I'll shoot Olympus and it's great. I'm a little confused by your post there, Eli. You're shooting Olympus, or you're thinking about shooting Olympus, or do you shoot Panasonic? If you're looking for a good lens for portraits, hands down, my favorite Olympus lens is the 45mm f1.2 Pro lens with the feather bokeh. Amazing, sharpest lens I've ever seen. A lot of people love the really kind of legendary 75mm f1.8 Emswico lens, which is by Olympus. I have it. It's amazing. Also super sharp. It's just a little bit long for my preference for portrait shooting. So I would encourage you to go with the 45mm f1.2. Gorgeous lens. Absolutely gorgeous lens. So Jeffrey Pierce started out with the Pentax K1000. I remember those. You just dated yourself. You're close to my age. Great way to learn photography indeed. Okay. So let's see here. Steven Stiles, currently a high-end Nikon and Nikkor user using full frame, considering a change for photojournalism and events. Most of the gigs are low light, pro sports, spot news, no flash. What are my non-Nikon options? Steven, I don't know if you were here earlier in the show tonight. I would say everything's your option. Even Micro Four Thirds is your option. Go check out the Olympus Visionaries. 2 or 3 of the Olympus Visionaries are Pulitzer Prize winners, man. Okay, so it doesn't get any better than that when it comes to photojournalism, right? So again, Stephen, I don't know how long you've been shooting, but at the end of the day, it's not the camera, it's what you do with the camera, right? So if we're talking in terms of system capabilities, so let's just talk, camera bodies with rapid fire features, et cetera, and then of course great optics. Obviously Nikon, Canon, Sony's catching up. They're in there. You don't see too many newspaper photographers, photojournalists shooting Sony, but you are seeing more and more of them shooting Sony. But you even find Olympus shooters now. There was a day when it was all Nikon. Then it came a time where pretty much Canon was running the race, winning the race for photojournalists, and Nikon was kind of a close by second. Canon is definitely in the lead at this point in the photojournalism world, but Canon and Nikon are bleeding users, big time, just bleeding users. There is so much benefit, even to a photojournalist. I'll tell you, Stephen, as a photojournalist, I wish that we had electronic viewfinders when I was a photojournalist. The idea to be able to see the finished image properly exposed through your viewfinder and know that you've got it, not have to chimp. Oh my God, how amazing is that? So, I would tell you, try them all out. If you're in the US, rent them. You can rent cameras so cheap, okay? That's really what you need to be able to do. You need to be able to get your hands on them and actually put them through the paces and make sure it checks off all the check boxes that are important to you and to your workflow. That's kind of the best way to approach it. So, George Druin, speaking of dating yourself, your first SLR was the Minolta SRT 100. There you go. Now everybody's like, okay, who can prove I'm the oldest in here? Mark Dolce, Mamiya Secor 100 D2L. Or DTL. So, yeah, my dad's from 1972. I bought my first camera in 1971. It's that one sitting up on the top there. It's the Hanimex Praktica Nova 1B. In fact, these guys, I paid $75 for this, and it was like the most money I'd ever spent on anything. But for those of you that are all hung up on features today, the way cameras worked back then, there's the light meter right there. That's the sensor part of the light meter. So just like the cameras today, it's a reflected light meter. It's reflecting the light reading the light reflected off the subject, but not through the lens, not inside, out here. Of course, you had, thumb advance, your rewind, Okay, dial. You had a little gauge there that gave you a sense of how your exposure was. Okay, you could read it on the top. Shutter speeds all the way up to a whopping 1/500th of a second. Like, wow, right? So, and then the other thing that they really need to put back on lenses, some manufacturers today do, but there's actually a depth of field scale on the lens. So you can determine what your depth of field is simply by looking at the lens after you focus your shot. So, let's see here. Austin, I have a few friends with a few experiences in modeling, but this weekend I will be traveling over to a neighboring island in the Caribbean. Show off. Oh, yes, right, Roderick. No hot shoe at all. To use a flash on this, you had little PC sockets down here. That was it, okay? So, Austin, going back to the Caribbean to shoot with a professional model for the first time. Any tips? Don't blow it, man. That's it. Just don't blow it. No, I'm kidding. Here's the thing. In all sincerity, if you're going this weekend, it's a bit late to be asking for tips. So all I can tell you is prepare and anticipate and go over your gear. Make sure you've got everything. Make sure you're covering all the bases, everything that you need. Hopefully you have yourself done some experience. Or had some experience with shooting models of that. But seriously, this late in the game, now I don't know enough about your experience level and what you've done to kind of really be able to give you any usable tips. I'm just going to be rambling stuff off the top of my head, so I'm not going to do that. So the best thing I will tell you is prepare, and over-prepare. That's the best thing that you can do. So Jeremy Mitchell, I'm looking at my Nikon FM2 with a massive motor drive bolt at the bottom. Dude, you're a kid. My first motor drive was on the Nikon F, the classic Nikon F, okay? So, yeah, Ian, it does belong in a museum. Let me tell you, I wish it still worked. It doesn't work. This isn't actually mine. I'll be perfectly honest. I bought this on eBay a couple years ago because I just realized I could find them for next to nothing. And so it's basically a paperweight, but still, it's cool because it's the camera. What I do have, ironically, when my mother passed away and I cleaned out all her things, I found out for some reason she had saved the receipt from my first camera. I bought it myself, but she saved it. So I actually have the receipt from my first ever camera purchase. It's a handwritten receipt for $75. So Pentax Spotmatic. Oh my goodness, yes. Okay. Zenith 1000. Wow, now we're going back. So Gary, a 4/3 question. When in post and you're cropping to an 8x10, is there less image crop compared to a full frame? Yeah, if you're shooting the regular 4/3 format, yeah, there's a lot less crop than a full frame. One of the cool things that the Olympus cameras do, and I believe Pentax does it too, but don't quote me, so I know Olympus does it. You can tweak the format in camera. So I can shoot it at 16:9. I can shoot it the same format as a DSLR if I want. I can set that all in camera. And all it's basically doing is cropping in camera. In fact, when the file comes out of the camera, it's still recording the full sensor, but it'll show up in Lightroom or that as a cropped image. So if I decide I don't want to crop, then I can just remove that crop in Lightroom, okay? Which is kind of nice. But yeah, if you're going to shoot as is, you don't have nearly as much cropping to do if you're going to go with standard print formats. So let's see, Cathal, this is your 100-second TogChat. You must get asked the same questions multiple times over in the last 102 TogChats. What is your most asked question? Probably is the Sony A9 great for weddings? No, I'm kidding. For those of you that were around for a while, will completely understand why I said that question. Honestly, Cathal, I can honestly say I don't think there's a most asked question. I think if you're alluding at the idea that there must be some questions that's like a little bit frustrating, to get them frequently. I think my biggest frustration is when people kind of ask the very generic, open-ended questions that can only be answered with an opinion, because that doesn't really help anybody, But other than that, no, I think they're always slightly different variances, So George Druin, apparently it's about one-agemanship. Touche. Very good. So Mark Dolce, what was the site that you discussed about finding a makeup artist? Let me show you here, Mark. I'm going to switch back over to my YouTube channel, bring up another tab, and go to my website, joeedelman.com. And once we get to joeedelman.com, up at the top of the page, there's a link here in blue. It says resources for models. If you're on your mobile phone, it'll show up in the left-hand navigation. Click on that. And what you'll find at the very top of the page here, modeling agency directory. Pick your state. If you're in, let's see, Colorado, go ahead and click Colorado, give it a second, and the page will load, and it's going to give you, whoops, and you can sign up for my newsletter while you're there too. It's going to give you the names, addresses, phone numbers, website links, email links to every agency in the state of Colorado, every legit agency in the state of Colorado, okay? So that's where you will find that information at, okay? Hope that helps. In fact, here, what I'll do, let me grab the link for the first page there, resources for models. I'll put that in the chat window so that you guys have it. Okay, there we go. So Anand is confirming for me, yes, the Panasonics do give different aspect ratios. There you go. Yep. So they do have that feature. So I think that's pretty much a 4/3 option that they give. Eli, will you be someday in France? Well, as a matter of fact, I just found out yesterday there's a good possibility I will be in France next year. Not for a photography event, but actually for a psychology event that my wife will be attending. So I will be going along because it's France. So fingers crossed. It'll be, I believe, in March of next year, if that comes about. So I will certainly report back with more information as we get closer. But literally, that was a conversation my wife and I just had yesterday. So we haven't actually made a decision yet. So, okay. All right. Let's see here. David, thank you for watching from Spain. Glad to hear that. Sorry, I know they're kind of late, but I appreciate that you do watch them after the fact. Okay. So scrolling back up here to see what we missed. I got to get past all these camera names now. Let's see. So Ben Roost, here's a good one actually, because this is something that comes up. He did a portrait session with an Asian guy. His eyes were quite dark, and in my images, his pupils and irises almost seem to blend into one dark area, which doesn't seem optimal. Any tips to help, please? So yeah, Ben. I mean, when you photograph, basically for someone from Asian descent, you've kind of got two things working against you. One, the irises of their eyes tend to be very dark. That's number one. Also something that frequently happens with African-American people. But number two, with Asians, also, Asians are not exactly known for having big eyes. So more commonly, their eyes tend to be a little bit narrow, which means you've got less of a space to really kick light in. So one of the things that you have to do as a photographer is you've got to be a little bit more careful with the placement of your key lights. So unfortunately, those shadows that you're talking about are basically the shadows that you created and actually should have eliminated. So if I'm photographing a person of Asian descent, I'm usually going to want to bring my key lights a little bit lower so that I'm getting right into the eyes as opposed to creating a shadow. If you've watched my videos, I always talk about how I tend to have it, let's say it's a medium softbox, right? I tend to have at least 2/3 of that softbox above my subject so that still the majority of the light is coming down. The bottom third is what's providing the fill. You always want just a hint of shadow. That's important. But with an Asian person, I'm going to tend to bring that light a little bit lower, so I'm bringing that as much light as I can right into the eyes to light up the eyes. So yeah, realistically, that's going to be the key. So Ronaldo, for on-location portraits such as weddings and events, can the mag mod, mag mount, and a speed light take the place of a shoot-through umbrella? Absolutely, Ronaldo. In fact, here, let me switch back to YouTube. There's a video I did. This is probably a month or so back. Let me click on the video tab here real quick, and there we go. So let me find this one right here. A good mistake plus a cool Mad Mod hack. Let me get you the link for this. In this video, I used a mag bounce, or excuse me, a mag sphere, right? The mag sphere. So that's it's the mag bounce. It's the open one, the big open one. But what I did is I flipped it upside down and shot the light through it. So it's not exactly what you're asking, but if you watch that video and watch the way that I did it, you'll realize that basically you can hack these really, really easy. Also, another thing that you can do if you just needed to perform like a shoot through umbrella or like an umbrella, Ronaldo, I know that you were at WPPI because I met you there in Las Vegas. The two wedding photographers that spoke for Olympus, Sean and Danielle King, they did a really cool MagMod hack as part of their demonstration, where basically what they did is they mounted a speed light on a stand and aimed it down, with the mag sphere aiming away from the subject, the open end away from the subject, but right underneath it, they clipped a big white reflector, like a 30-inch or a 43-inch white reflector. So it basically creates this big white dish that gets lit. So when that speed light goes off, some of the light's going to come directly through the mag sphere towards the subject. The rest of the light is basically being kicked back into that reflector and spread out around that reflector. Makes for some really, really beautiful light. I am working on a video that will come out later in April that's going to show a bunch of MagMod hacks. I will also suggest that there is a Facebook community called the MagMod community, which is actually an excellent community if you're into MagMods, and definitely some amazing and brilliant photography that's going on in there. But check out that video that I did, and then hopefully you got to see Sean and Danielle King. And if you didn't for some reason and you're not sure what I'm talking about, shoot me an email, Ronaldo, and I'll basically send you back a little description of it, or even see if I can find maybe a picture of them doing it. And definitely really easy to replicate, but you would totally be able to come up with light that is very similar, if not identical, to a shoot through umbrella with it. So, Richard, any word on when the Honey Badger Power Pack will be released? It's probably, I've been told, because I specifically asked, I've been told by Interfit, it's probably going to be kind of towards the end of the summer at this point. As is often the case, unfortunately, when dealing with Chinese manufacturers, you run into issues along the way. And they ran into an issue not with the production of the unit, but there's all kind of certification that has to take place. And there are, appropriate steps, et cetera. And all it takes is one little miscommunication and a step gets thrown out of place, and then everything kind of gets put on hold. So it's coming. It's happening. I think they're looking at like July to August at this point. But I will be sure to let you guys know as soon as I learn anything. Okay. Sambo 7817. How do I like the Olympus pen so far? Absolutely love it, but I've only had it for actually less than 48 hours. So I've shot a bunch of stuff with it, just kind of, like my dogs. I've been annoying the heck out of my dogs for the last day and a half. But yeah, absolutely loving it. It'll get its first video test on Monday because I am going to be using it for video. So I say it's a gas purchase because I think it's such a cool camera, and I know that I'm going to use it for kind of a carry-around camera. But in reality, it's replacing my Panasonic G7 for the purpose of shooting B-roll in the studio. I don't need the audio on my B-roll at all, so I'm not worried about the fact that I can't plug a microphone into it. That's not a loss for my needs. So I will be using it for video for the first time on Monday, so I'll be able to report back a little bit more on that as well. Okay. So let's see here. Is it worth to do images for bank images? I'm not sure what you mean by that, Eli. Give me a little more information there. I'm sorry, I'm not quite understanding that. So, Carlos, thank you very much for the kind words, man. I really, really appreciate it. So, Eli, how many hours of work do I do for one tutorial? It depends on the tutorial, but unfortunately, quite a bit. Because think about it, when I do a tutorial, like even like the one that I just showed for Ronaldo with the good mistake video. Okay, so a video like that, I have to do a shoot. So I'm gonna spend the best part of a day photographing a model to actually do the techniques and things that I'm talking about in the video. Then I have got to process those images, do the retouching, etc. Then I've got to write a script. Then I've got to record the script, and then I have to do all of my B-roll and that for it. So I mean, as an example, like the video that I posted last week for the 3 DIY tricks to create depth for your portraits, this one that you see me circling right here. So that was, do a shoot with this young lady, process those images, do the retouching, then write a script, then shoot the video of me talking the script. Then the next step is to set up the mannequin, set up the lights, shoot more stills and B-roll of the setups to walk people through it, and then edit it all together. So a video like that one is actually like the best part of 4 days to actually, put that together. It's quite a bit of work. So some videos I can do shorter and a lot quicker. When I used to do the Images Reimagined videos, which some of you ask from time to time, have I given up on them? Haven't given up on them. It's really just a matter of finding the right images, because if there's nothing that I can really do to improve the image, if it's just a subtle improvement, it's not a very interesting video, right? But those videos I can actually usually get out in like a day because I'm not shooting anything, But there's a fair amount. So let's see, George A. Last time I couldn't get your question. You didn't get your question answered. Hopefully this time is the one. Do I use back button focus? Is there an advantage on that? I don't. In fact, I wound up in a debate this weekend for the sake of another person at the event that I was speaking at. There was a woman that was asking about that, and people started, kind of taking a poll. So Rick Friedman, who's a very, very well-known photojournalist. If you don't know him, check his work out. He's amazing. He was also one of the speakers. He was there. He loves back button focus. I hate back button focus. So we both kind of did a debate over back button focus and, what works, what doesn't work. And at the end of the day, we both said the same thing, and that was you do what works for you. I hate it. I don't like it. I disagree with the concept mainly because things move, people move, you move, your subject moves. So in the time that you're recomposing, especially if you like to shoot, wide open at 1.8, that kind of stuff, you are running the risk of having things move to the point where you're going to have a soft image. That's my argument for it. But it's not about a right or wrong. It's about what's right for me. And what's right for me, no back button focus. I've never had a problem using a shutter release, ever, at all. So let's see here. Eli. Images. Oh, okay, so you're talking about stock images. Stock images, in my opinion, are not worth getting into unless you are going to make a serious commitment to it. So yeah, so in fact, it seems like the Russians are the ones that really own the stock photography market right now. But the guys that are doing it, and they're making millions every year, they're shooting literally thousands and thousands of images per week and turning them out. So it's not like they're, taking a shot here, taking a shot there, and then making a bunch of money. Now, if you think you're going to make money that way, not going to happen. Simply won't happen, period, okay? The only way you're really going to generate income doing stock photography is if you are, number one, an amazing photographer who has a style and a look that is both trendy and in demand, but also nobody else is doing it. And at the same time, you need to really have your finger on the pulse of what the advertising and the editorial community is looking for, or you're just going to turn out an incredible amount of volume of images. One of the two. Otherwise, you're not going to make any money. There was a time where stock photographers made a good bit of money, but today, when stock photography can be purchased really, really inexpensively, that's just not happening. So, it's a business model that's changed quite a bit. Let's see here. I saw a question about Westcott eyeliner. Carlos, have you ever shot with a Westcott eyeliner reflector, and what do you think of it since you've mentioned you don't like to use a reflector from the bottom? Okay, so understand, I never said that I don't like to use a reflector from the bottom, right? I said that when you're using a reflector as a key light, which when you're doing reflectors outdoors and you're re-aiming the sun, that's using the reflector as a key light. When you're doing that, you do not put the reflector below the subject's face because it creates up shadows, okay? Or the idea of simply having a reflector as a fill, but having it too close or too bright, then it's going to create an up shadow. That's the only thing wrong with using reflectors under. However, Carlos, now that you mention it, here's my thing about the eyeliner. So, number one, it's stupidly expensive. Stupidly expensive. A lot of, Westcott's a weird company. I've said this many, many times before. Westcott makes some products that are actually dirt cheap. And then they make other products that are grossly overpriced for no good reason, which makes no sense. So I've got a few Westcott umbrellas that I got for like less than $20. And then there's things like the Westcott Rapid Box, which is very similar to the Photoflex Rapidome. But the Photoflex Rapidome is like $100 and some less than the Rapid Box. And it's actually a better build with better feature tweaks than what the Rapid Box has. So what's the sense? So here's the thing about the eyeliner though, Carlos. If you Google the West Coast highlighter, and then you look at click on the images tab. The best part of it is the overwhelming majority of people that use the highlighter use it wrong, and it becomes the brightest catch light in the eye, and it's big and it's obnoxious and it steals all the attention away. So, the highlighter is like any other reflector. Use it right, it looks great. Use it wrong, looks like crap. Most people use it wrong, horribly wrong. That's the problem with it. Okay. Let's see here. Cathal, recently watched a few Peter Hurley headshot videos all about the squinch. Cathal, it's not about the squinch. And if you, I hope you're kidding, because it's the most dumbass thing ever, period. You can quote me on that. Okay. I've talked about it many times before. Go back in the archives. Okay. Let's see. Anna, what's your favorite technology document reader? iPod, phone, or my phone? Mike Davis, in the world of digital, can you basically do anything to a photo? Where do you draw the lines when doing a portrait? Well, okay, so I think you're kind of being a little loose with your wording. So let me try and fill in a little bit here. In the world of digital, in the world of digital, you can do basically anything. Sorry, I misread your question. Okay, so where do you draw the line in portrait? It depends on what you're doing with a portrait. Meaning, if it's a portrait of someone and they are your client, they're paying the bills, you draw the line at what is going to be acceptable to them. You can't go in and change the way they look without their permission because they're paying the bills. That being said, like when I do one of my fashion portraits, I will change a person's look dramatically. I'll make their lips bigger. I'll put more definition in their cheeks, change their jawline, make their eyes bigger, change their eyebrows. I'll do whatever I need to do to create the image that I want, because that is my image, my vision that I'm generating. So I have absolutely no problem, in that kind of sense, making major changes. That's not a problem at all. So, okay. Let's see here. Keep going. Al B, Luma Pro LP180 with the Edelman 622 controller and receiver. Any advantage at all to use the sync cord between the flash and receiver instead of the hot shoe on the receiver? No, not really. Not that I can think of. I guess there is actually, no, not that I can think of. I wouldn't want to use the cords if I can help it. Does the Edelman 622... it's the 180, so it's strictly manual anyway. You're just using it to fire. Yeah, I would use it for wireless. That's what I would use. I don't know that I would put the wires in. So, okay. Let's see. Ian, do I change my Kelvin or stick to one setting? Of course I change my Kelvin, but I'm not sure what the context is you're asking. So you have to set your white balance for whatever your light source is, right? So when I'm in the studio, I always have my Kelvin, my white balance is set to 5600 Kelvin in the studio. That's for 99% of what I do. All right. But if I'm shooting out on location, I'll usually use auto white balance. So it really kind of depends on the situation. But you have to, unless you're going to filter your light sources always, or only ever use like 5600K, light sources, you have to adjust your Kelvin on a shoot by shoot basis, depending on what your light source is. So, all right, let me scroll back up here real far just to see if there's anything else I missed. Of course, I didn't quite make it in an hour. Shocker. Adam Batchelor, way back. How did I learn retouching? Hours and hours and hours and hours and more hours and more hours. And guess what? I'm still learning. You never stop learning. Honestly, you don't. Simply for the reason that Adobe keeps coming up with new features. In fact, yesterday, for the first time, I got to use Adobe's new Select tool, which is pretty cool. It's in the Creative Cloud version of Photoshop, where you don't have to use the magic wand or anything like that. You just do Select Subject, and poof, it manages to find your subject. Now, I was using it on a shot done in a studio, so it was on a solid color background. But man, I'll tell you what, it was pretty doggone accurate. Like, very, very impressive. Saved me a ton of time. So you never really stop learning, honestly, in that sense. So, David, what is pixel peep? I'm sorry. Pixel peeping are the people that will take a picture, and in order to determine whether or not the camera's any good, they have to blow the image up to like 5,000% to look at it, instead of looking at it like a normal human being. That's what pixel peeping is. Okay. Not a phrase that I came up with. In fact, it's a phrase that gets bantered around a lot between Tony Northrup and Jared Polin and Ken Wheeler and all those people. But, it kind of makes sense. It's the idea of, just diving in there and looking at an image in an unrealistic resolution to try and determine what the quality of that image is. Makes no sense. So, Sven, no one rents out Olympus here in Norway. Yeah, but the big question is where is the closest Olympus to you? And if you're interested. So again, for those of you that are like, if you're in Europe and you are sincerely, I'm begging you, please have a little respect for my time. If you are sincerely interested in making a switch to Olympus, let me know. I will gladly do some research for you through the Olympus folks here to find out where the programs are available in Europe. I can't promise you they're available all over Europe. I don't know, but I believe Olympus UK handles much of Europe, in which case there are ways that you can essentially borrow the cameras from Olympus to try them out, okay? Another question from back in the beginning. Leon, what would be more practical, a secondary speed light or a reflector? If you only have one, or Leanne, sorry. If you only have one, start with the reflector. Master the one light and then the reflector, then add the second light. That's the way to go. I promise you, okay? Start with the reflector. So... let's see here. Going back up. Did I get everything? I think I got most of it, if not all of it. Let's see. Got the fashion photography one, outdoors landscape. Okay, cool, gang. So let's just see what came in down at the bottom here. Try and catch the last of them. Mike Davis. You guys liked it. You like to get me in trouble, don't you? Mike Davis is asking, thanks for the honest advice. I enjoy your videos. What is your opinion of the Fro guy? I got tired of hearing the most expensive is the one to use. Look, here's the thing. Each of the different YouTube photographers has kind of their own shtick, right? I'm not a fan of Jared Polin only in the sense that I feel his show's more entertaining than it is true value. But let's face it, he's got a lot more subscribers than I do. So what do I know? I think at the end of the day, regardless of who you listen to, you take the information they give you and you still have to be an educated human being. You've got to get your head wrapped around it. You've got to make your own decisions and you're going to walk away and you're going to use, what works for you. Kind of, like we had the question earlier about, back button focus. There's no right or wrong. You will find that the people that use one or the other feel very strongly about it. You'll rarely find anybody that's on the fence when it comes to something like back button focus. Nobody's wrong, in that sense. It's just a matter of, what's right is what works best for you. Capturing media, what I'll use to stream with. Currently at the moment, you're looking at me via a Panasonic GH4 with Olympus glass on it. I use Wirecast streaming software, bunch of other little gadgets, but that's it. Blackmagic design, mini recorder to basically down res the 4K feed that's coming out of the camera into the 1080p going into the computer. Adam Batchelor, trip to London after France. That's a good possibility. I really want to make it to the photo show next year. I was kind of hoping to make it this year, but it didn't work out because I had another booking for a speaking engagement, but I really want to make it over to the photo show. So hopefully, fingers crossed. So Jean Edward, do you have any favorite photo books? No, honestly, I really don't. I had traumatic experiences with photography books when I was a kid because when I was a kid, I went dutifully when I got my first camera, 11, 12, 13 years old, I went to the library and tried to find books on photography. And this was, 1971, 72, 73. And all the books were like bigger than the Bible, black and white, and they were printed in the late 1950s, early 1960s, and it was all rules, and it was all you have to do this, you have to do that. It was painful. So no, I avoid photography books. So let's see here. Mario, there was a TogChat last week. It is online. Look for the playlist for TogChats. They basically get archived right afterwards, but they go into the playlist. So if you click on the playlist tab on my channel, you should be able to find them. So, and last question, guys, and then I'm gonna run here. So, Gerald, do I have a preference for how much catch light you want to see in a portrait, not fashion, or does it totally vary shot to shot? Yeah, it totally varies. I I'm not one of those people that gets overly obsessed with catch lights. In fact, a lot of photographers hate the catch lights in my images, where I have like the vertical catch lights or that kind of stuff. For me, if the catch light becomes obnoxious, then I don't like it. If it's not obnoxious, then I don't mind. Catch lights that I find to be okay, other photographers find to be obnoxious. So it really is kind of a very personal, choice in that sense. So Mike, you're going to love that Rapidome. I think you will have a lot of fun with it. Eli, is it necessary to write and sign a contract when you shoot for free with somebody, like a future model or somebody else? Not so much a contract, but it's a good idea to get a model and release if you're shooting a model. That way you can use the images after the fact. I find, I'm not a big fan of contracts unless I absolutely need it. I do not like litigious people. I avoid litigious clients. I grew up in a time where you did business by a shake of the hand and it meant something. So I try to maintain those values. But I've also found that the best rule of thumb is good communication skills via email. So I always talk to people, have conversations face-to-face or on the phone. You need to do that because photography is a people business. But as soon as you get off the phone, send an email. Hey, just wanted to thanks for that conversation. It was great to talk to you. I wanted to follow up and make sure that we're both on the same page. We agreed that we're going to do this, and this. I'm going to give you this. You're going to give me that. This is what's going to happen. This is when it's going to happen. Spell it all out and send that email. That becomes the paper trail, so to speak, and becomes the contract. So, Carlos, last question. Will mirrorless definitely replace DSLRs? Hell yes. And it's not going to happen soon enough. That's my answer. All right, gang. Hey, listen, thank you all for hanging out with me tonight. Have a great week. Get out there and take some pictures, gang. Finally, depending on where you are in the world, the weather is starting to kind of get a little nice. So get out there and shoot. I'm going to be out playing with my Pen F this weekend for sure. And hey, hope to see you next week. I'll be back here for TogChat. Video coming out this weekend. In the meantime, please remember these words.
Thanks for watching another live episode of TogChat. Now go and pick up that camera and shoot something, because your best shot, it's your next shot. So keep learning, keep thinking, and keep shooting. Adios.